Good morning. It is Tuesday, March 22nd, and I would like to call the meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee to order. We do have a quorum. All members are present. The first item of business is the minutes from February 22nd, 2022, and I do have one change. It's a goof I made. I accidentally called our accountant, Cliff Swan. I called him Cliff Smart. And while he is very smart, it was a slip. I do have a friend in Missouri. He's president of Missouri State University, whose name is Cliff Smart. And so I just got them confused. So that needs to be amended to Cliff Swan.
I like Cliff Smart better.
Do you? Oh, okay. Well, if you want to legally change your name, we don't have to mess with them. Mr. Smart. Okay, Mr. Smart. Any other changes that anyone saw? And I do thank Gary Bosak took our minutes last time, and today our minute taker is Richard. So thank you very much. First order of business is to have a program by Brown & Brown. I am not affiliated with this, in case anybody needs to know that this is not a conflict of interest. I'm going to introduce our speaker and let them do a presentation on our property and casualty insurance. And speaking to them in advance, they will entertain questions from the committee during the presentation, if you have any, so they don't mind. It's not, you have to hold all your comments until the end. So take it away.
Thank you, Ann. Is my microphone working here? There we go. My name is John Newhouse. I'm with Brown & Brown. Previously, in 1994, I started a company with 6 other guys by the name of Hayes Companies. We grew that company to about 800 employees. We sold it, and now we're part of Brown & Brown. Our business is property casualty and employee benefits insurance, and so we work with businesses across the country that place their property casualty insurance. On your account, myself, I am the leader of the account, John Newhouse, the account leader. I oversee all the activities of the employees of Brown & Brown. Stacy Anderson with me here. Stacy works day to day with the different insurance companies and with Pete and Cliff to procure the insurance, to handle the different day-to-day issues that may arise. You may add a vehicle, subtract a vehicle. You may have certificates of insurance that are required. So Stacy works with them. Working in conjunction with Stacy, I gotta change my slide here. Sorry. Working with Stacy is Christy Brown. Christy's in the office 100% of the time to address the various questions and needs that may take place. Bill Doherty on the chart up there. Bill, because your account is a larger, more complex account, we have a couple of specialists that get involved. Bill Doherty focuses on the executive risk, so that's the D&O and the employment practices. The board buys D&O insurance and employment practices insurance, and so Bill helps procure that for the board. And then Alyssa Turek, she's a new addition to your team. Alyssa focuses exclusively on cyber insurance. Cyber is a very hot and complex topic these days, and so that's Alyssa's focus to make sure we're getting the very best coverages there. Can you help me with the microphone? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Taking a quick look at, I think I was asked to do a couple of things this morning for the group here. One was to give you an overview of your existing coverages that you guys have in place. Number 2 was to talk about the current state of the marketplace and what's going on in the insurance industry. That's the educational part. And the third part is to let you know the expectations that we have for your upcoming insurance renewal and stuff, okay? So the current coverages that you guys have in place in the blue boxes at the bottom there, Philadelphia Insurance Company, Philadelphia focuses on your type of business. They have a program that does a number of similar related accounts, and so they have designed a package with all the unique coverages that you guys would be exposed to. So Philadelphia writes the first $1 million of general liability coverage, and there's no deductible on that coverage. And what is general liability coverage? That would be the general liability, slip and fall. So somebody slips here at the board meeting and hurts their arm. I slip in the parking lot, cut myself. That would be a general liability type exposure. The second type of coverage that Philadelphia writes is employee benefits liability. You have a number of different employee benefit plans that are in place on behalf of the employees of the company. We provide protection for them. You have about 100 autos, as I recall, that the company has, and so we insure those autos for that. We have liquor liability. The liquor is served on premises, and so we need to carry liquor liability. Now, those four coverages, Philadelphia writes the first $1 million of coverage. Sitting above Philadelphia is a second policy from Philadelphia offering $10 million of coverage. That's the green box there. And that's a great benefit to have Philadelphia being willing to offer that $10 million of additional coverage. Many of you buy an auto policy and you may buy an umbrella that sits over the top of it. This is the exact same thing. That umbrella is sitting over that. So there you have $11 million of coverage with Philadelphia. On top of Philadelphia, you also buy an additional $10 million of coverage. So now we're up to $21 million of coverage that you have in place. And then finally, sitting on the top of that last policy is an additional $5 million of coverage. So on any one accident, so if you have an auto that's driving down the road and has an accident, hits the bus filled with children, the company would have $26 million of protection. 1 million with Philadelphia, then another 10 with Philadelphia, and then those next two policies. Does that make sense? On the far right-hand side of that chart is the directors and officers liability coverage and employment practices. Directors and officers liability coverage is the board is making business decisions, and as claims were to come against the board for the business decisions, there's coverage for them, acting on behalf of the business itself. The business has employees, and if we wrongfully terminate, so there's the big three, there's wrongful termination, harassment, or discrimination against an employee. If we get a claim back against us for that, we have the coverage. As you can see, that box has $5 million of coverage there. Sitting on top of that $5 million is $10 million of additional coverage that Philadelphia gets. So if we were to have a wrongful term situation, we would have up to $15 million in coverage for the corporation or the company. Any questions on those coverages?
Yes. I have a question on the liability. Has Sun City West ever had a claim of any significance on that policy or portion of the policy?
Yes, we have, John, and at the back of my presentation, I have a listing of a couple of the larger claim summaries, and so is it okay to wait till the end to bring those up?
Absolutely.
Yep. The next page is have some additional coverages that we help you guys procure. The next far left box is the property coverage there. And we're insuring all your buildings. We're insuring the contents of this meeting room and those types of items. And we've got, 50-some million dollars in coverage, $57 million in coverage that we have in the event of a claim here. And we've also had a couple of larger property claims. And what are the claims that we would see? Hail-type claims, I think, are the two that we've had 2 six-figure hail-type claims at the premises here. You guys also have some golf carts and ATVs that the company is required to insure, and so we insure those. We have a policy for the cyber coverage that I mentioned. We have a specialist that places that. So if someone was to hack into your systems, seek a ransom or a demand, you've got a $2 million policy for that. Next is you have a box called the pollution liability. I think at some of your golf courses, you have above ground storage tanks, fuel tanks, and so we're required to carry a pollution liability policy for that. You also then have fiduciary and crime, so employees were to steal from you guys, that would be one type of coverage that you would have. Fiduciary, there's various ERISA plans that the company has in place that you're required to act as fiduciaries on. We have a protection for fiduciary there. And the third thing that I would say is the ERISA requirement. The government requires anytime you have a ERISA policy or ERISA plan in place, you're required to carry an insurance policy, and so that we're in compliance with that. Probably on an annual basis, with either Pete or Cliff, the auditors ask them for a copy of that ERISA bond, and we provide that. And then the last policy that's in place for you guys is a fiduciary policy. There's a couple of notaries that we're keeping in compliance there. Any questions on those coverages? Yeah, Gary.
Is it a strategy to have so many different carriers? Is that part of your strategy, and what's the rationale for that?
Yep. So we try to get it as much as possible with one carrier, but when we're not able to do that, what would the reason be? Because they're not able to maximize pricing, we're not able to get the best coverage in the marketplace. Okay, and so, Philadelphia does many of your lines of coverage, but Philadelphia does not offer the best policy form for cyber. We can get cyber from Philadelphia, but it wouldn't be as broad a coverage as we would want to offer to you guys, for instance. Same with the fiduciary policy. They offer fiduciary, but it's not going to be the best coverage that's available and at the best price. So in that case, we do go out to the marketplace and seek somebody else to make sure. Because our goal, 100% of the time, we were bantering before the meeting started, was it's about price, right? I totally get that. 9 out of 10 of my clients, price matters, and I got to get the best price and the best coverage. And you guys are no different. So I've got to optimize those two things every time when I go into the marketplace for you guys. Yeah. Any other questions on these coverages? Yeah, Dick.
I do have a question for you. What's your strategy for reviewing policies to make sure that, is it annually, or do you have an ongoing review process? As you said, at any time they tell you it's not about the money, it's about the money. And I'm talking for us about the premium cost. Mm-hmm. So what type of assurance do you have to us that you're constantly vigil and looking for better coverage, better price, at least to offer it to us?
Yep. No, so I'm not sure how everybody's personal auto or homeowner's policy works, but the commercial insurance marketplace, I think I'll answer it in a couple of different fashions. The commercial insurance marketplace, your insurance renews once a year, and yours is coming up here in the next few weeks to renew. And so once a year, we have to market it and possibly decide, do we want to stay with this carrier or leave this carrier? Okay. And what's happening during the course of the year is we were down here 3-4 months ago, and we started talking with Pete and Cliff about some of the things I'm going to talk to this board about, the state of the marketplace, what's going on in the marketplace. And so we gave them a state of the marketplace. We had some preliminary conversations with a number of your insurance carriers. What are they anticipating for the upcoming renewal? What are we seeing from our existing renewals, right? I work on 50 accounts or some large number of accounts that I work on. And so I'm working every day in the marketplace, and I'm seeing what's happening in the pricing, right? So I know right now I've got a number of our accounts that are renewing April 1st. I know what I'm seeing from other carriers. And so I'm balancing that, the long-term relationships that we want you guys to try to establish with your carriers in conjunction with the current state of the marketplace to make sure we're getting the best price, right? So there's kind of that constant balance that's taking place. We have regular conversations and open meeting our open agenda items meetings with Pete and Cliff that we're talking to them on a regular basis about what's going on with the business here. One big thing, Dick, this year in particular about your business that probably many of you have heard about is just construction inflation. We all know that the value of construction today compared to last year has gone up considerably from both a raw materials perspective and also from a labor perspective. And so we had to make some adjustments to your building values this year in case the buildings were to burn down. We had to increase them, so we made sure we were able to replace them with like, kind, and quality. So those kinds of things, Dick, are kind of taking place. Does that help answer it? Any other questions? Yep.
Yeah, you can answer these anywhere you want, so if it comes up later, but I kind of have three questions. When you look at the deductibles, obviously increasing deductibles will lower your premium. What is kind of the ratio I see in buildings and properties, $5,000 deductible? That seems quite small to me for a deductible.
Yep.
So what's the gain in the reduction of the premium? That's one thing on deductibles. If there's like another 5,000 would reduce it by whatever. Mm-hmm. My second question is, most insurance carriers that I've been familiar with actually, and I'm not saying you don't do this, kind of walk around the whole property mm-hmm. and advise the Sun City West changes they could make to lower their premiums.
Yep.
So is that something that happens frequently? Then my third one is the same question I asked last year, because we have an employee liability side, and I had asked if you review the HR policies for harassment, sexual discrimination, etc., and if that's been done. Now, last year the answer was no, so we'll see what the answer is this year. But anyhow, those three and sometime in your comments would be great.
Sure. So, I mean, I'll come to the deductible question here. So there's a regular dialogue that takes place on the deductibles with Pete and Cliff. My general rule of thumb is 3 to 1. I think that's what you're ultimately wanting to know is if I can save, if it's going to cost me up to 3 times and I can save 1 times that, right? So so by example, the property's $5,000. Let's say we take the deductible up to $10,000. So that I increased it by $5,000. What's my savings for that? And I just got the answer actually this morning. The answer is $3,000. Okay, and that's probably a fair trade-off, right? When I look at your loss history, we don't have a lot of smaller claims, and so maybe it makes sense to save $3,000. Alternatively, we look at what does it cost us to take the deductible down, right? Because we're always trying to push the carrier to get the lowest deductible possible at the optimal price, okay? Because there'll be a time and a place where we want to take the deductible up. We don't want to, we have to, because we've had bad claims. And the carrier may force us to take that deductible up. And so I don't want to give up the deductible necessarily until I absolutely have to. So if I'm looking to save $3,000, I'd say, hey, take it up. I'm fine with that. And I look at your loss history. We don't have a lot of claims between $5,000 and $10,000. We can take the deductible up, I know, to $25,000, right? And save $10,000. Yeah, $9,000, I think it was. That's a little bit more borderline, but I still think, $20,000 more in risk, save 10. There might be some logic in doing that. Okay, but then as the finance committee, they have to make a business decision at that point in time. If I'd had some claim activity, do I have that disposable budget to pay claims? In addition, let's say I have 3 claims that are over $5,000 that are greater than 25. Well, that means there's $45,000 in additional expenses that the finance committee is going to have to pay. And does the finance committee have that broad of a budget to be able to spend the money for that, okay? So that's how I think about deductibles. In general, I like to see my clients buy it as low as they can, as long as they can. And then as the marketplace pushes them to take it up, I encourage them then to take it up, okay? I never want to get into dollar trading games with the insurance company, but sometimes that's part of the process. Okay?
I think you said you were going to show the claims history, right?
Yep,
Okay.
we have there's either 2 or 3 large 6-figure hail claims that we had. Okay? And so those would both be over $5,000 and over $25,000. In both of those cases, the finance committee would have had to come up with an additional $20,000 in each of those claims. You know, and again, those are your decisions whether you want to spend those. What was the second question again, Kathy? What was your second question?
Second question was on reviewing HR policies
Yep.
to make sure that the policies line up appropriately with sexual harassment, discrimination, et cetera.
I don't know what was said last year, but I mean, as part of the underwriting process, they look at all of your HR practices and procedures. Now, I mean, they're not going to necessarily say, like on cyber today, so if I look at the cyber underwriting marketplace compared to the employment practices, which is I think what you're really driving at, Kathy, cyber will be much more specific on what they say they will allow and not allow. Okay? Cyber will say we'll only allow this, and if you have it this way, we're not going to insure you. Under employment practices, which is, you know, looking at the HR policies, they'll look at it, but they won't tell you that you have to change it. They'll just price it accordingly. Okay? Now, what we can do, and we can work with Pete and Cliff on it, is we do have access to some sample other policies. If I think that's where you're ultimately going with this is, you know, do you want to see some sample other ones? And we certainly can provide those. We have resources, some resources that we have access to that we can share there.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, I'm not suggesting we don't have policies, so I want to be clear on that.
Yep.
Just to make sure that they get the tweaks they need along the
Yep.
way as the world change and as people change. So
Yep.
that's all I'm suggesting.
Yep.
Say something really quick. I'm sorry to interrupt. I know our carrier for specifically this line of coverage does have a hotline that an employee can call from the HR department, and they can speak with a representative to talk them through the different procedures that are in place for the rec centers to see if they align with today's world. They have almost like a counseling service where they can discuss this. And I have talked to an HR representative here and shared that. So I can send it again and we can start that process.
There was one other, Kathy, I thought you had in there between those two questions. And just Ann, just so
walk
you're aware,
around,
we're at 20
yeah.
minutes, so I want to be
Yeah,
respectful.
my fault. My
I'm
fault.
only on page 3. I don't want to put anyone to sleep.
It's my fault, but the other one was typically an insurance carrier will, and my experience has been, and I'll give an example. For example, if we put in safety valves in the steam tunnel, the payback on that in 3 years compared to reducing the premium was a no-brainer. So do you walk around with the staff and identify, if you do this, we can lower your premium by that?
Yep, so I think what you're talking about specific, Philadelphia is your carrier. They specialize in this type of business. They have been down here. They've done some analysis of the property. They've looked at a number of the things. I don't know the last time they've been down here, whether they were down here in the last year, but yes, it's a common practice for them to do that and be looking at things to make sure. Yep. You know, I look up here at the ceiling because that's the common thing. You know, they look at it and say, do we have sprinklers in the building, right? That's a common thing. But they would also come and look at things, you know, when they maybe would look at the bowling alley, or they'd look at, you know, the bar area. Do we have four pointed stools as opposed to 5, or things like that? Offer those suggestions, because since they write so many peer companies to this, they see a lot of claims, right? And they're trying to minimize that activity. Okay? And how are we doing on time? No. I'm glad to take the questions. I'll speed it up, or I'll be done. You tell me, Ann.
I think we definitely want to hit all the high points. I don't want to leave out things that are pertinent.
Yep.
And I remind everybody in the audience both that what we're looking at with this insurance, this will not require any approval by this
Yep. Okay. Okay, I'll be done in less than 10 minutes. Is that good? Yep. Yep. Press on, they say. So then I put in here a chart, another page. Just, we mentioned earlier, liability, you guys, by $26 million of limit. I put in here a chart just so you guys can get a quick visual where we tried to get businesses similar revenue. Now, these don't necessarily mean they're the exact same industry they're in. This is driven off of revenue, but people sometimes wonder, how much limit should I buy? Am I buying too much or am I buying too little? As I look at you guys based upon your revenue size, you're on the high end of what similar revenue type businesses would be buying. So some people may ask the question, why am I buying so much limit? And as I look at your business, I would say it's for the following reasons. One is you've got 100 autos. I don't know if any of you are seen in the marketplace. I do a bunch. I insure about 10,000 trucks across the country personally. My trucking clients are having claims, and when they have a claim, it's astronomical. There was a $1 billion verdict in Florida, a $750 million verdict in Texas, both involving autos. Anytime there's an auto involved and a business involved, the plaintiff attorneys are taking these cases to trial and the juries are paying an exorbitant amount of money. And we're calling, in our industry, we call that nuclear verdicts or social justice juries. It's the when people get hit by a car, they win the lottery is the perspective. That's one reason why you guys should have $25 million. A second reason you guys should have $25 million is you serve liquor here. You know, many of the members that may be there, they're probably high net worth people. If they leave your premises and they have an accident out there on the main thoroughfare, they're going to come after the corporation hard for serving the liquor. And that's the two reasons I think that I would buy the $25 million. Now, the second reason is, you know, if you go back a couple of pages here and look at the chart here, the last $5 million in coverage up here was $12,500. So we can save $12,500 but buy $5 million less. And as I think about it from a fiduciary perspective, if I'm on the board and I could have had that coverage, but I chose to save $12,500, I would be like, what were we thinking, guys? $12,500, let's spend the money and have the limit. So that to me is, you know, just justification of why you should do that, okay? Market trends, a real quick educational part here. Here's a chart that is put together by a third party that is projecting the price changes in our the insurance marketplace today, okay? By line of coverage, we kind of listed out there. In general, what's going on in the marketplace? There's some lines that are slightly better than others, but in general, the marketplace has been, we call it, it's a hard market. That means prices are going up. So if last year you paid $1 rate on something, this year it's going to go up $1.06, $1.10. Why is that the case? Because the claim activity that the insurance industry has been paying, they're paying more claims than they're collecting premium. And we have a cyber group, and I have one full-time attorney in my office that tells me he's seeing 1 to 1.5 claims a week from our clients on cyber. Where this year I've had 2 clients call me on a Monday morning and tell me, John, we were hacked this weekend. Okay? And so we have a claim activity. There's other lines that historically just have not been performing well. Auto is one very easy line of coverage to understand. Auto has performed for the last 8 years. We've had to get rate increased. The cost for new bumpers in the front of the car, it used to just be a piece of steel. Today it's got electronics in it, and it's $5,000 versus $500, and distracted driving. Very easy to understand. The claim activity is out of control. I put in here by line of coverage just a number of highlights. I think I tried to highlight those already here, so we'll kind of skip through those if you're okay with that. Anybody want to ask about a specific line of coverage before I skip through that? Finish it? Because I can talk about all of them for a long time, as you can see. Here I have a chart here that's got your loss summary. So there's a few pages in here. So this is specific to your business right here, okay? That we have here. And so you can see in the 2017 year, we had a property claim that was $110,000 there. 2018, we had another large property claim. Someone asked me about a large liability claim. We had a large liability claim in that year. And you can see in the, and then we total it. So for the last 5 years, you've had $443,000 in claims that have been paid out. Okay. The next page, just trying to give you guys a visual. Some people had wanted to see premiums. So here I show at the top of the page the premiums by year, by line of coverage, and then we show the claims, okay? And so you can see that when we aggregate it across the board, you've over the last 5 years, you've paid about $1.2 million in premiums, and the insurance company has paid $443,000. What does that mean in our world, right? That's an important figure there, and this page kind of brings it home, right? In our world, in the insurance world, they talk about the loss ratio. What's a good loss ratio? And on the left-hand side of this page here, we say it's 40 to 60% is what we see. Why does a carrier have to make only pay out 40 to 60 cents? They got their own level of overhead that they have to have. And then they also have to collect some additional dollars because keep in mind, Philadelphia, they could pay out $11 million in a claim for you guys. And they would never make that back in their lifetime, right? And so they have to build up a little bit. So 40 to 60% loss ratio is viewed as a good loss ratio. Your account is a very favorable account. You're at 44% over the last 5 years. So that's viewed as a very favorable account. Let's see, here was just a couple of types of claims. I think John was maybe asking me about the types of claims we've had. So we've had a couple of property claims there at $110,000. We had a water main break. We had a slip and fall for $40,000. We had an auto accident, for $14,000. And we have a trip and fall on the premises right now that's reserved at $200,000. So those are some of the larger types of claims that your business has experienced over the last number of years.
And just a quick question. When you say $200,000 in reserve, that is what you would do for a filing claim that may not be the actual amount. Is that correct?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Still waiting for additional dollars to be paid out and settled. Yep. All right. As we mentioned, the renewal is coming up here, and we've communicated this to Pete and Cliff already, but what is our expectation on the upcoming renewal? I look at your account, it's viewed as a favorable account. As I mentioned, you have a pretty good loss ratio. I mentioned that there's pressure on rates. I showed you guys what some of the by line of coverage renewal expectations were. Majority of them were over 10%. When all's said and done, I think we're anticipating about 6 to 7% increase from your existing carriers as we look forward to the upcoming renewal to finalize that.
John, this has been a great presentation. Do we have any more questions from committee members?
Pete's got one here.
Pete does, okay.
There is a second. Kathy, I think you had a separate. So briefly, we'll do a little history on our premiums.
Yep, is that? Oh, okay, yep, here we go. So here's a spreadsheet that's got historical premiums that you guys have paid over time. And as you can see that the numbers have been going up. So keep in mind, though, that each year you may have added more vehicles. Property values have continued to increase, and so we haven't baselined all of these to the same number, So if we added 10 autos, the premium just went up by the cost of the 10 autos, and we didn't factor in the cost there and stuff, okay? But you can see that, you in 2017 to 2018, you went from 272 to 281. That was a 3% increase. From there to 299, that was in the 19 year, that was a 7% increase. Now, couple all of that, I didn't
Appreciate that. That's why they're working with this group. Bill, yes.
I understand what you're talking about. When we add property, we add vehicles, and that affects our premiums and those types of things. But at the national level, forest fires and those types of things, property damage at the national level, what are you all seeing that's really causing some of these big jumps?
Yep. So we call those catastrophic losses, Bill. I insure a number of businesses that are involved in wildfire. I insure a number of businesses on the coast, hurricanes and earthquakes. Take the California wildfires out by the Boulder area. That was about $1 billion insurable loss. Take a number of those wildfires out in California. Those are multiple $billion fire losses that are insured. The insurance industry has to pay. You take a look at hurricanes and the like on the East Coast. The problem with a lot of this is construction has always been geared towards getting it closer and closer to the coast, and so there's greater and greater values as we get closer and closer to the coast compared to 10 years ago, and so there's multiple billions of dollars in losses. I've got lots of charts that would basically say the CAT industry, catastrophic losses, they have historically expected, I may not have the numbers exactly right, directionally I'll have it right. Historically, they think it may be 10 or $12 billion. But in the last 5 years, it's running at $20 billion. So running much hotter, much more, and catastrophic losses are the ones that really, really impact the industry dramatically, right? Is that kind of help give you some context to that, Bill?
I have a quick question. Bill,
Yes, Richard.
Bill, maybe you can answer this or not. The cybersecurity, and currently the state that we're having because of the geopolitical problems we're having. Do we do audits to make sure that we are secure, and do we have companies whose function is to validate and verify that we're currently up to date against all hacking, and is the PPI type information secure?
Yeah, this is Katie O'Grady. We don't do a external audit per se, but when we did, the cybersecurity portion of the application does come to our offices for checkpoints. So there's several different questions, and they seem to change and get more voluminous every year on what we do, what our protocols are, what spam policies we have in place, et cetera, et cetera. So as he said, they don't accept or cover the cyber for us if we don't meet those qualifications. So that's the first step of it. And we have, every year we keep up with this stuff, not just from the protection we have on our network, but we have instituted end user training, which is one of the biggest. It actually is the number one potential exploit is your users. So we have really pushed that up this year with phishing training on all our users. Every month they go through phishing training. They hate me for it, but it has improved their knowledge. They're looking for the right things, and so they wouldn't be covering us cyber-wise if we didn't meet the expectations with having these different things in place. So we have not done an external audit, however.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Anita.
Thank you for a very good presentation. My question to you is, as we are a 501c4 organization, have you guys benchmarked any other types of homeowners associations like ours? And where do we fall into the mix with our premiums and our ratios and so on and so forth?
Yep. So the association, homeowners association, I had mentioned, I did highlight that, but Philadelphia, they have a program that focuses on homeowners associations, okay? And, when someone had asked about one carrier versus many, Philadelphia, they've tried to figure out how to write the majority of those lines of coverage for your homeowners association. they're one of the leading, if not the leading carrier to write homeowners associations. When we try to benchmark you guys to the limit, I mentioned, $25 million that you guys buy in umbrella limits. That's not compared to other homeowners associations. There's not enough of a big population that I have access to a public data that people are willing to share. Okay, so it's just, I do a couple of others, but I'm not going to compare you to 3. That's not a fair benchmark. The last part of the puzzle I think that you were asking about was the rates. How are we doing in our rates compared to our peers? And it's hard to specifically say that, right? Because if I benchmark you against another homeowners association and they have 0 claims and you're having 40 cents, is it fair that you're both paying the same rate or not? So we try not to say exactly this homeowners association is paying $100 for this and you're paying $110. There's different factors based upon where you're at. For instance, take auto exposure. Auto exposure in Texas is very different than auto exposure in Minnesota. The juries and the verdicts in Texas are exponentially worse than in Minnesota. And so when my clients have vehicles in Texas, they're paying exponentially more in Texas compared to other places. And there's other states too that same example exists on. The same principle applies. Bill had asked about the catastrophic exposures, right? My homeowners association, I have one that's down in Florida, right? Well, their property rate yours is 14, you're paying like 14 cents per $100 in value. They're paying like $1, right? Well, because they've got hurricane exposures, very different than you. So it's difficult for me to want to get too much into exactly benchmarking you, and that's why I gave you the general marketplace data, was to try to frame you guys in relationship to the general marketplace, okay? Does that help out a little bit, Anita?
Any other questions? Oh, John.
I have one last question. I apologize. This is, I'm having a hard time keeping up with the curve here in some of the very sophisticated discussions, but the liability, or cyber liability, as I look at the schedule of premiums, it's a small part, a very small part. What does that really cover? Clearly, for $6,000, you're not going to pay a huge, a multi-million-dollar payout for ransomware.
Yeah, you are.
So what are we getting for that coverage, and what isn't covered? And please don't go too deep because you'll lose me.
Yep. So cyber. Think of it as it's going to cover, I think, for this group, 2 main items: first party and third party. Okay. So you get hacked by a third party and there's a ransom demand, we'll pay up to $2 million. So the question is, you do have up to $2 million in coverage. So they come out and they steal your data, and you guys determine that the data that they stole is valuable enough that you want to get it back, and you're going to have to pay. The majority of the ransom claims get paid out. It's about $600,000-$700,000, okay? And they're going to pay it out in Bitcoin. And so they're going to have somebody and they're going to pay it in Bitcoin. So yes, you have coverage for that. The second thing you're going to have is if your business, now maybe not as big of an issue here, but if your business were to shut down. So I have a manufacturing client that their business shut down and they could no longer make their wood cabinets because they didn't know which ones to make. And so they lost revenue. So it would cover that as well. So the first party for you guys for paying the third party paying for the cyber claim, the experts that's involved in consulting, helping you guys get through that to get back and running. It is $6,000, $2 million limit. And that's a reflection of, we don't see a huge exposure for you guys. And then I think up there, someone, I don't know where, was it you? Someone talked about the cyber controls you have in place. You're doing pretty good.
Thank you.
Follow-up question on that. Let's say somebody does hack us and downloads our information. All right, so there's a restoration of the data that potentially we have lost or we can't get our hands on, all right? What about the people who have been hacked? Because they're going to require that we put in some type of LifeLock, something along those lines. Where
They're covered.
Protecting them. Would that also be covered?
Yep.
Okay.
Anything else? John, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
You bet. Stacy, thank you for being here too.
Yep.
Moving on, we're going to have a presentation of the January and February 2022 financials by Pete Finelli.
Thank you, Ann. Again, good morning to y'all. With the busy agenda, I'm going to rapid fire through these if you don't mind. So the first part is revenues, and the common theme throughout is golf course revenues. Bowling every month are doing very well against budget in prior year. So what you're going to see on most of these slides is a January and February, and then a year-to-date will be just through February. So there's February, same common theme. Moving to the expenses, a relatively narrow bandwidth of variance, 108 excess in January, and virtually right on par with February. So the margins, on the operating margin for January, an 88 favorable, and for February, 165 favorable. I mentioned moving to year-to-date, the same themes, golf course, pavilion, ancillary, which is reflective of cart rentals and range balls. Very favorable, a little just under 1.1 million favorable year-to-date. And we all know about the expense that I've mentioned at previous ones on landscape maintenance, which had $280,000 governing board approved spend above the budget. But even with that, we still are favorable 105 year-to-date. So the operating margin year-to-date through February, just under 1.2 million favorable. Moving to our capital-related portion of the income statement in January, the themes are pretty common again. One's good and one's not so good. The APFs have been with strong markets, housing markets. The APFs have been running favorable. Many of you are invested in the stock markets and the bond markets, and generally speaking, we're pretty diversified with a 90-10 ratio, but both of them have been negative year-to-date. So some impact in that, of course, not necessarily year-to-date, but I'll get to that in a second. And the same theme in February, favorable APFs, and some impact into the unrealized valuations of the reserve funds. So year-to-date, very, very strong performance in the APFs. The impact year-to-date of about 1.2 million on the reserve funds. So overall, negative through February, about 520,000 on the capital-related portion. And when you measure the just the current month, I'm going to move through these pretty fast and move to the year-to-date. The overall income statement, therefore, 1.2 favorable, capital-related negative. So at this juncture, we're still about 650,000 ahead on the overall income statement. And then if I could move to the, any questions on the income statement?
Pete, are there any other major expense items that have been a surprise in these last 2 months? Anything specific that we should, I mean, we all know about the landscape maintenance, but have there been any big surprises?
No, I think the only one that has impacted beyond what we budgeted of some materiality was the health insurance.
Okay.
And that was budgeted for about 10%, and I think the premiums that we showed you were about almost 19%.
Okay.
So that roughly is a 15,000 a month impact, but on about 2.4 million a month, that's relatively modest.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chairman, or Chairwoman, I have a question. And Pete, this might be the kind of question you simply can't answer. In looking at the wages and the benefits, I'm thinking of impacts down the road as I ask this, okay? We talked in previous months about some of the incentive programs, hazardous duty pay, some of these things. I kind of regard things, some wage expenses as one-offs. They're things, they're temporary, maybe they're not baked in. And wage scales, for instance, is the opposite end of that spectrum. It would be baked in. The wages are sticky. They tend to not go down and so forth. In looking at our wages and expenses, is there any way to categorize what we're seeing now baked in going forward, or a lot of these temporary hiring things attributable to turnover, incentive programs and things like that? And I realize that's a very squishy question to ask. I'm sorry.
Well, definitely are analyzing what we see in some of our larger HOAs around us. And I was talking with the CFO over at Grand, and I know you guys have already blessed the budget move forward, but on a very broad basis, they now have no less than a $15 entry level wage, which is what we're proposing this year to get to. So that's not the answer to your question. I know one thing I think we did, and I believe that was communicated, was when that health insurance renewal came up, the percentage that the employee contributes was 20%. With the inflation running at upper 5, even 6, 7%, our wage adjustments were in the 4% range. So most of our employees were losing ground in terms of real wage. And so with that 20% hike in health insurance, we really believe that would be a double whammy against our employees. Not to mention, we're already on the low end of the entry level hourly wage. So that one's baked in, and I believe it was the right strategy. I think we're getting favorable reaction. We continue to analyze our profit sharing plan and our 401k contributions. Just in about a month, we're going to be rolling out a conversion to principal from American funds, and that might not mean a lot to you guys, but there's about 5 or 6 pretty favorable reasons for doing so. I won't go into any length right now, but one of the bigger items is it's a less of a employee cost for the investment fees that are charged by principal than what American Funds was charging. And from a BNF level and to the governing board, our fiduciary responsibility was managed at a local level very well by, Denise Bavarick in the past, but that level of fiduciary responsibility typically lies within these companies at a broad scale, and we're moving towards that and away from that risk that we were absorbing. And you mentioned, or we just were presented by, our property casualty insurance representatives, and he didn't highlight it too much, but fiduciary is in there, and anything you can do to lower your risk, it helps. I know that's way beyond what you were talking about, but we always are looking to try and improve for our employees.
And don't misinterpret. My question was not a challenge. It was looking for insights into what we need to be looking forward to as a community in this area. So the insights is what I was after. So thank you.
You bet.
Quick question. How many positions do we currently have open?
Bill, does HR represent? I don't think we get that communicated.
Oh, it changes. It changes daily. I would, at least post it. At least there's 10? I know there's down 20 in golf, but we are down considerably. And hiring is a bit of a challenge.
That's actually the number I was gonna say was 10, but.
I think you made a statement that $15 per hour is the minimum as a start, and we're at the low end. Okay, so what would we have to do to become competitive, and what would we have to offer? $16, $17?
Well, again, the entry level right now on our current scales is like $13.20. And in the proposal that you've got coming up, every non-manager position in that proposal on July 1 would go up by $1.80. It just would move unilaterally across the board. I don't know the number of employees that are at that opening scale, the 1320, but it's not necessarily a ton of them. We have a lot of our maintenance, golf maintenance guys are more in the third or fourth tier. So I wouldn't say that we just openly hire at $15. That would be a mischaracterization for many of our positions. Sadly, as Bill alluded to, golf maintenance in particular continues to be a tough draw.
And Richard, on the back of the program here, there is what they call labor shortage for total FTEs, full-time equivalents, and it looks like we're down about 22 as full-time equivalents. That isn't 22 people. There may be, 15 part-timers, 17 part-timers in there. So that's kind of what that was baked in there. And that is a great question. How many were down? Like Bill says, it changes daily, but overall, it's right there for us to put into our budget.
Thank you.
Sure.
And if I may, just a point of clarification back here. Your question on budget anticipations, was that directed at our operational budget, or did that include capital as well? You had a question for Pete. You had an anticipation. Are we anticipating any other bumps in the budget?
I was just thinking in terms of operational.
Okay.
And again, I had noted the chart that George referenced here. I figured we were down about 10%.
Okay.
Of about 10% open against the FTEs. Just trying to triangulate in on the impact, not just now, this year. In fact, I'm far less concerned about this year in my question and going forward, because you're faced as the operational arm of the community with a choice, guns or butter, cut services or continue services and pay. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And I guess if I have a bias in my question, it's don't cut services. We all are here because of them. So that's all. And my questions have been answered. I knew you had more access than I do to what's driving these numbers.
And I do believe Cliff will be referencing that FTE schedule in his presentation, but we're working hard every day when we have a position opening, we're constantly evaluating whether or not there are other methods of doing that. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why we've been COVID or anything else. So for capital related, real quick update here. Again, our POs, the governing board approved 5.7 million. We've extended 4.7 million of purchase orders. 4.4 of that is on the current year. Items that have actually been received in, paid, and completed is about 935, and we've executed savings on about 115. I do want to put a little star by this one, though. One item that has not been completed because it broke ground maybe a month ago was the Environmental Services Office. And that was a governing board fact and finding approved of about a little over 117 or 118,000. So I track this all the time on projected, and we'll still be we'll be at under our budget allotment by the end of the year, for sure. The dwindling of any kind of FY 21, 22 absolutes from changes that we are making, that's going to be presented at the governing board on April 8th, but we're still well within the low 50s and upper 40s, which is well above the floor of 40%. But on a factual basis, we entered the year, as we said, at 58%. Currently, as I presented a few minutes ago, operating is $1.2 million ahead of budget. Investment earnings are doing better with the yields going up on the bonds, which is painful to get some of the valuation, but you'll be expecting to get higher returns on the investment earnings. APFs have been very, very strong. I mentioned the closed purchase orders, 116 savings. That probably would be closer to zero by the end of the year, and the allowance, healthy amount of 265, but we are proposing to use about 120 grand of that for, 170 grand of that for this vaccine findings. Last 2 months, I don't evaluation change, so about the biggest change from the last presentation was the decline in some of our valuation, but still on a pace to be ahead of prior year by the end, ahead of budget, I should say, by the end of the year. And even if we did not have any of that, we'd be at a 55% threshold as we exit the year. So I believe we're still in a pretty strong position. So, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Moving along, we're going to discuss FI 10. This has to do with our vendor relationships, and as you'll recall, last month we agreed to have this reviewed by our attorney, and I think all of you have a red line. We had the original red line that was proposed, and then after working with our attorney, these are the changes that have come back, and I'll just read those. They're on the screen.
And may I interrupt you just for a second? I'd like to have consensus to move the.
Yes, thank you, George. George always keeps me on track. I do need to ask, do we have consensus to move the January and February financials? Thank you. Accept them as they have been. Thank you, George. I know we all do. Thank you. Going to FI 10, I'm going to read what the attorney sent, which would be the new revision of it. Any employee, committee member, or governing board of director of the association who holds or has any member of their family who holds any interest in a business, company, or organization that directly or indirectly conducts business with the association or that may profit due to the association business or activity must disclose that interest to the appropriate general manager, committee chair, or governing board president as soon as possible. Those employees and committee members, including directors serving on committees, involved in such interests must abstain from participating in any decision-making process that may materially benefit them because of those interests. Arizona law states that governing board directors with such conflicts must declare the conflict in an open meeting of the board before the board discusses or takes action on any such an issue or contract. Although the law states the director may then vote on the issue or contract, the governing board strongly prefers that directors abstain from voting. And this is what we had vetted by our attorney. So do I have any comments?
I have one question, Ann.
Sure.
Would it be worthwhile for the attorney to put the statute number in there? So this way, people that are not familiar with this law could actually go in and visibly look at it on the ARS website?
Any comments from others?
I do. I have one. I'm very, I don't know if concerned's the right word, but although the law states the director may then vote on the issue or contract, the governing board strongly prefers the director abstain from voting. That's kind of like saying, gosh, I wish you wouldn't do that.
And I'm not sure that we can actually require that someone not vote. I think that's where someone's ethical conduct should come into play. I know, that's a gray area.
It's a good question, Ian. I'm sorry.
It's just that I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that, but I'm not sure that, I accept your explanation of the ethical standards, and there's basically, when it comes down to it, we're all going to be bound by, what we think is right.
Sure.
And so I just wanted to voice my concern that I don't think it's strong enough. But
Kathy?
Yeah, that was my question. Although the law states that last sentence there, and I'm not familiar with Arizona law, so as an organization, I believe we can have more restrictive than the current law in the state of Arizona or in the county. And if we can, and it may be that we can't, okay, but if we can, then I think that last sentence needs to be removed. And it would probably need to go back to the attorney, but I find this more confusing than what we originally had. Speaking from a law background.
We've had two recommendations. One, that we need to include the Arizona statute number in this. Is that correct, Anita? Okay. Thirty-two. 33-1811, and that would be statute 33-1811.
My comment on that last sentence is the rationale is to take that sentence out simply because the last sentence is an opinion. Although the law states, that's an opinion, not the law. So I'm not going to lose sleep, but I just think it confuses it.
Okay. How does the committee feel? Should we add this statute and return this to the committee for review of that last sentence? How do we want to proceed with this? George, I'll start with you.
I'm very much a proponent. If the attorney has written it and he is the group that will defend us in front of a judge or whatever, that is the person I will go with on that. I think that it's written sentence. He put it in there for a reason, and that would be the question that I would have, what that reason would be. I'm very much in room when an attorney sends me something that represents the association. I don't want to go against that directly. Thank you.
Okay, so you would add the statute?
Absolutely.
But leave it as is?
Absolutely.
Okay, John?
I defer to the comments made by others. I really don't have a great deal of expertise in here to understand and weigh these words. The comments made by George, Committeeman George here, resonate with me. The attorney's advice, I have to defer to people that know more than I do about this.
Richard?
As I see it, the attorney is giving us the option as to whether or not we want to accept this. So what we could do is turn around and say, take away the option of may and make it a stringent requirement saying must. And say, basically, you can't vote. If you turn around and say something may, you're given an option, so it's open up to confusion. And that always leads you to a lawsuit.
But if we change may to must, it would say, although the law states the director must then vote, you're saying that directors must abstain from voting? I'm not trying to figure out where your must would go in.
Actually, what I would do is strike most of it and simply turn around and say something like, the governing board, director must abstain from voting.
Okay,
Take the option completely away from it.
okay. Dick?
Well, I think that George, I think, made some very good points about if the attorney has sent that to us. I'm not comfortable removing it. I think that, but I think it's unclear. You know, I don't like that last sentence. It's just, to me, it just sounds non-committal. I think we have to be definitive about it. Either they can or they can't. So, and I like Anita's suggestion to put the reference in there. I think that's absolutely satisfactory. I am not comfortable with removing any of the verbiage that the attorney sent, but I think what they have sent is not. I'd like to get a clarity, or I'd like to get some more, either more firm language or some kind of clarity.
Kathy?
Yes, I go back to the reason I do think it's unclear. If Arizona law states that they may vote on the issue, and we have to follow Arizona law, then it should be written that way. But we have must, and then we have may later in it. So my question is, as Sun City West, can we make a more restrictive policy than the Arizona law? And I don't know the answer to that question. I think that last sentence clearly muddies the waters.
Hang on just a second. I'm writing all this down. Where did you see a must that above?
Not in the highlighted area.
Oh, okay. Must declare. Okay, I was trying to make sure I knew which one you wanted. Okay.
So if we have to follow Arizona law, and Arizona law says may, then we have to follow Arizona law. But if we can be more restrictive, then let's be more restrictive and strike out anything that's different.
Okay, Gary? Anita, I'm just coming around to everybody.
I think what's confusing is that when it talks about the committee members or employees must abstain from participating in the decision-making process, voting is part of the decision-making process. And then down below in the last sentence, when it talks about they may vote, you've told them that they must abstain from participating in the decision-making process, but then you've allowed them to vote. That to me is contradictory.
Okay, what about adding the statute? Okay, and I got that you did too. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, Anita?
Quick question. Is the attorney talking about two different statutes? I mean, the way the first sentence is worded says must, and then he says, although the law states. Is there a different statute that he's talking about? That is a question I would be asking the attorney. Because if it is, yeah, you are comparing apples to oranges. So that's a question I would be asking.
I will have to say, I'm glad this is being YouTubed because I'm not sure I'm getting all this.
Well, and I would I know we can't vote or whatever, but my advisement would be to return it to the attorney.
Well, that's what I was going to say. From the opinions of the committee, most of you would like to see a statute reference put in there, the number of the statute, and then return it to him with questions. Can we make a more restrictive ruling than the Arizona law? Do we have to follow the law? Is he referring to the same statute in both these instances? And, do we even need that last sentence? So I would say that we need to return this to the attorney and discuss this at our next meeting. Excuse me, Tim, yes.
Yes. The statute that Anita just referenced, begins somewhere in there with notwithstanding anything other than in the documents, which basically says the state law trumps whatever you want to do here. Basically what it's saying is if you have a conflict of interest, you must, required to, announce that in an open meeting. The state law does say that then they may vote. And I think what the lawyer's trying to do here is just trying to suggest that the board doesn't really want to get into allowing conflicts of interest, but you can't stop them. So I really like the language that the lawyer has here, and I think you should move it on to the board.
Bill?
I think just to reiterate a little bit on top of what Tim was talking about, I think when we're talking about what the Arizona state law really is talking about here when they're using the word must, and that's the declaration of a conflict of interest. You should declare that. You must declare that logically and ethically. And then when it says that they may vote on the issue, let me try to give you a bit of an example. In the world of city government per se, if we have a member such as you, Ann, who's overseeing the BNF or the finance committee, and a city council member in your position owns a dry cleaning company, and the police department has their uniforms dry cleaned. Every month, there's a bill. Every month, that council member would declare that I do have a conflict of interest here because I do own a dry cleaning company, and we are writing checks to that dry cleaning company, right? As a declaration of conflict of interest, right? Is it material? And that's where you're going to get into that argument of, the semantics of words and that type of thing. But if it is a material benefit to you, can you still vote on that? As long as you're declaring that, it's an ethical declaration, and yeah, you can vote. Are we talking about a $6 million project that, we're going to grant to your husband? If he owned a pipe company, we're buying a bunch of pipe, different story. And then you have the quorum issues if there's not enough people regularly to vote, and if a member of the board can't vote because of a small, immaterial item, conflict of interest wise, you get into those kinds of problems. But I think the attorney in an attempt to kind of, just kind of spell out ethics, yes, you must declare a conflict of interest, but then you still may vote on it if it's a kind of not a non-material thing, but preferably he would prefer that the director stay away from voting, as a summary.
Yeah, and just a comment on Bill's comment. I think the issue, Bill, is in this one sentence, it says you must disclose, and I agree with what you said relative to that. Few sentences or a few lines later, it says then they must abstain from any decision-making process, which goes back to Gary's
what Gary's saying, right?
That you can't vote. Then it says they may vote. So between the two yellow highlights, I think it's looking at that sentence to properly align it with a vote, because here it says it must abstain, the way we have it written. I would not want to defend this policy.
Right.
The way it's written.
Yeah. Okay.
It must disclose.
I see the must disclose.
Okay, and then go to the first yellow highlight, and at the end of that, it says involve such interests must abstain.
Okay.
So now it's must disclose, I agree with that, must abstain, and then later it says then may vote, which is a decision-making process.
But I'm wondering if the second must, that refers to anything that may materially benefit them. So when you get down to the may, it may or may not materially benefit them. May not be a material benefit. So I don't know that, we're going to get into kind of some muddy waters there.
Well, then make it written like the state law is. Don't mix it up with one of each. Because the red is ours, the bold is the state law at the bottom, apparently. I understand the difference between disclosure, discussion, and decision-making. And those three terms seem to be not real clear here, but I'll be quiet.
My take on it is,
Richard?
we're intelligent people and we're getting confused. So if we're getting confused, then, you know, other people will get confused. So what we need is someone to clarify for us. So, I mean, I'm taking a look at it and say, must abstain from participating in the decision-making process. So they leave the room, somebody else comes up with a decision, then you come back on in and you're allowed to vote for it, because you weren't part of the process. Somebody else may interpret it differently. So my take on it is send it back to the attorney for clarification of our questions.
Okay, I'm going to go around one more time, just so I make sure that I reflect what the committee has to say. We have agreed, I don't know if it was unanimous, but certainly majority vote to add the statute. The next thing will be, do we accept or send back to the attorney, just so I have this down on record. George? John?
Accept.
Richard? Dick?
Send it back.
Kathy? Gary?
I think we send it back just for clarifications. It may not change based on what they come back with, but I would send it back.
And Anita?
I agree with Gary, send it back for clarification.
Okay, we will send this back for clarification and put it on our agenda for our April meeting.
Could I add something? I think that there was a great amount of clarity with Tim and Bill, and I accept their explanation of that, but I think that that is different than as is written in this document. And that's basically my justification for not changing my mind relative to this, because as John said, we're smart people and we interpreted it differently.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is facts and findings of the CC&Rs office.
Next door to this facility is being assessed. The CC&R division is needing a home, and we have come across about 1,500 square feet or so of space with the departure of the village store. And we're trying to put what we think is a very good use into that space. The CC&Rs have been operating out of a section of a storage room, basically, within the village, within the social hall for quite a while. With the renovation of the social hall floor, the CC&R division was then moved over to the lunchroom within the administrative offices, and they've been there ever since. They've been, I think, 3 or 4 people share the lunchroom with another staff person, I think, sharing an office with another recreational employee. And what we've been dealing with now is a little bit of a lack of meeting rooms when we deal with sensitive owner issues, as it just becomes very, very awkward dealing with some of those issues without private settings. Like I said, the CC&Rs was located to a small administrative room in the lunchroom, and we do have a privacy issue that we're trying to get rid of. Additionally, meeting space was sacrificed with a lot of the improvements that went on over at the Beardsley Recreation Center, as well as Palm. The Acacia and Palo Verde rooms were eliminated, thus creating a little bit more of a need for meeting space for a lot of dedicated clubs and owner members needing that type of space. So what we're proposing is a little bit of a housing. Half the facility will be dedicated to the CC&R division and the other half for open meeting space. A contractor has been consulted, bids went out, and the low bid for the construction portion of the process is about $122,000. $3,500 in fees for Maricopa County and permits. The fire system review and permitting fee is about $1,000, and we're looking at about a $35,000 expense in CC&R furniture and contingency. With that, we are requesting that $162,381.85 via a contract that we can begin in the month of May to get this facility renovated. Carl is not here to get into in-depth as far as where that money really kind of gets further diversified, but he did provide some information relative to what we've got or what we're experiencing over there. Over the years, things have changed up in the attic per se, up in the ceiling where we've got HVAC and ductwork. The Rip and Sew facility had been expanded. Staff had gone up there and relocated various types of air conditioning valves and ductwork to satisfy the needs of Rip and Sew as well as the back office, which was once the village store. It was a challenge with the amount of air conditioning available to them. At one point, you know, the Rip and Sew folks were sweating and the folks over in the village store were freezing to death. Adjusting those, you know, then the whole situation would flip-flop. So what's in the attic is not really accessible and usable and not really where we want to go. So the remodel, regardless of who were to use this new facility, we need to put some additional kind of more modernized equipment up there to make it more usable. That being said, part of this program includes a $25,500 installation of a new HVAC unit, re-engineered ductwork to make everything basically work as it should. $29,700 basically is needed for new electrical, new LED lighting and code compliance corrections from the lecture hall here and the panel that basically, electrical panel that serves this facility as well as the other two. The wiring that had gone on over the course of X years needs to be basically brought up to code. So again, regardless of who's using that building, code compliance is a huge factor in some of the improvements that we're making here, and we are attempting to complete that with this project. Also inside both the new CC&R offices and what will be the new meeting room, there's about a $10,000 expense in the reflective ceiling as far as that drop down, and those panels are all in there, so a new ceiling was going to be provided as well. And as far as the demo work and the framing and masonry with new doors, sprinklers, and that type of thing is about $57,000 of the overall expense. So when you look at the overall breakdown, yeah, it could seem a bit expensive for $162,000 for the 1,500 and some odd square feet that we have, but there's a lot of infrastructure repair going on in there, both electrical and structural, that we're also taking care of at that time, and we ask for your support.
Thank you so much, Bill. Before we start with questions from the committee, I do want to tell you, if you've ever been behind the scenes in the administrative offices of the rec center, you will notice we're almost going to have to go to bunk desks to put them one on top of another. It's getting very crowded over there. And I admire our staff for what they do in such limited spaces, but this will definitely open up some room right there for them. In this process, this proposal has been to Properties Committee. They have approved it. Let's see, Donna, it didn't have to go to you, did it? Didn't have to go to Donna. So normally we would have seen this at our first meeting in March, but because our first meeting in March is actually what would normally be the second meeting in March, we haven't seen it yet. Today's our first day to see it. It has been at the board workshop, I believe. It was at the board workshop, and the board will vote on this on Thursday. What this is for the budget and finance to just merely give their input. I will have to say whether we bless it or don't bless it, our results then go to the board, and the board will make the final decision. So that's where we are in this process. In case you're wondering why haven't we seen this sooner, it's because we did not meet earlier this month. And Carl does have a timeline trying to make sure that we can get the prices that we've been quoted, because if any of you have shopped lately for any construction materials, you know they go up almost hourly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and
anyway.
Mr. Finelli, I think, touched on it briefly in the budget report, but funding for this project is projected to come out of the existing operational budget under the allowances portion of the program, and there's adequate funding there to support this.
Yeah, thank you, Bill, for reminding us of that. So I'm just going to open it up now. Does anybody on the committee have any questions? Gary?
Bill, at the governing board workshop, I understood Carl to say that you were going to use a lot of partial walls interior in the office as opposed to permanent. And in this document, I see we're going to do 3 constructed walls, is there a combination of closed offices and open office area?
Yes, and Riley's got, I believe, some floor plans and some furniture diagrams he can share with you. There is one wall that is going to separate the two halves of the facility with a required doorway in between the two. But primarily where the CC&R scenario is being laid out, yes, there'll be a lot of petitions, not so much permanent walls being in there for if anything were to come up. Otherwise, it'd be an easy fix.
Yeah, that was the purpose, and easy to get out of it if we have to do something different.
Right.
I just have a comment, and I appreciate the last statement Bill made, that there's enough money in the allowances and in the savings to fund this project.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't think that comes out clear.
Okay.
So I think it's important that we're approving the project, but not another $162,000. And that's what kind of brought me to really starting to question this project with the savings. I think it's an important point to make.
I can clean that up.
And so however it goes forward to the governing board, maybe we need to refine the statement or add a statement.
Can do. Thank you.
And I'd just like to say one of the things that Director Hurley consistently brings up during the governing board meetings, and anything that has to do with this, is our need to look at infrastructure. We're looking at a room that hadn't been looked at for 20 some odd years. And when you open it up, and we all have done construction in homes or whatever we have, when you open the walls up, you don't know what's behind there sometimes. And to say here that we need to have the right air conditioning and the right electrical and the right fire systems in place for our employees and for our owner members here, I think is very, very important. It's something that we need to remember when these dollars are put in front of us, that they are repairing things that haven't been looked at for a long time. This is what we were faced with at Palm Ridge when we moved the computer room too. Thank you.
I think this is more editorial. I had the opportunity to tour some of the spaces and specifically the area where this is being proposed to go. And I would like to endorse this. The space that they're working on now reminded me of my years in the Navy aboard ship. And they were very small, very cramped. And to say that they were highly optimized in usage would be an understatement. So they were even sharing offices. So, and I mean more like cubicles.
Yes.
So I would endorse that. The only shock I have is the cost, you know, and I there's nothing you can do about that. It is what it is. As George says, you know, you've got to have infrastructure and air conditioning.
Right. I think it was calced out, but 160 square foot on that. And I think construction-wise over the last couple of years, it's been well over 200. So I think a lot of in-house work and Russ's team have done a lot to kind of help prep this thing, get it going. But but I agree.
And this is just the right thing to do.
If any of the committee is interested, when the board meets on Thursday, we will be doing a field trip over to visualize the area. So, any other comments from the committee? Anita?
I just have one question. What is the estimated completion date? Hopefully we'll get the air conditioning issue resolved before it really starts getting into 120 degrees.
I'm not sure. Carl that's in his camp. I'm not sure. I know in our notes here it's May 23rd as far as a start date, but I do, so it's going to be 100 plus by then. Any idea, Russ?
May, and it probably is going to be a month and a half, 2 months long. There is air conditioning in there, so it's not like the workers are going to be in the hot box. It's just once we put up a dividing wall, it's going to sever that and we won't have AC on one half of that space.
So we don't have to pray for cool weather?
No.
But Bill, what are the permit times? I think they've been 30 to 60 days. You know, you can only go as fast as the county allows, so.
Any other questions from the committee? I'll just go around to see if we have consensus to move this forward to the board. George? John? Yes. Richard? Yes. Dick?
Yes.
Kathy? Okay. By consensus, the Budget and Finance Committee moves this forward to the board for their meeting on Thursday. And as I said, if anybody is listening in our audience or our committee members, if you want to see this, there will be a field trip during the board meeting on Thursday. You don't always get a field trip when you go to a meeting, so no refreshments though. Next up, Cliff Swan is going to tell us about some operational and capital budget changes. And I really want to commend Cliff because last month we really shot a lot at him. He probably felt like he was a target, and Pete managed to get out of it with jury duty. I'm not sure which would be the better thing, to face this group or go to jury duty, but Cliff did it with a lot of professionalism to him, and he listened to what was said, and I think the committee made some great ideas, and now he's going to show us the results of that. So Cliff, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, committee. There's no refreshments in this portion either, I'm sorry. So we had presented this on the 22nd of February, and appreciated all the feedback. Terry and I went back and circled back with Pete, and we adjusted did a lot of work on the presentation itself, because a lot of the feedback came towards that. So we did. So I'm going to share some of those things with you, and then made some tweaks to the budget as well, and presented that revised version to the board on the March 11th workshop. And so the details of that, you can go and get that presentation and the supporting documents on the March 11th governing board board docs posting. But just wanted to take some time to go through some of those changes that we made with you today. I think. Oh, there we go. Okay, so some of the takeaways that we had when we came out of our March 11th presentation that we got from this committee was to continue to educate our members on the challenges that we're facing, job market pressures, employee retention, inflationary pressures. One of the other takeaways we received was to make sure that our non-members are bearing a greater share of our fee increases that were proposed. And then as far as the presentation goes, and this kind of falls in line with educating the community, is to add some visuals and display some analytics in terms of some of the numbers associated with the financials. So we've done that. I'll show you that. Also, the APF fee, we proposed originally a $100 increase, and the feedback received from this committee was we should match Sun City's APF fee. So you'll see that's been incorporated. And that overall the community would support this budget if we did it in this fashion. So the impact of the changes right now are in total, the budget changed. It went from $1,561,000 operating inflow to $1,584,000 or $585,000. And then you could see the APF impact down in the APF's capital related portion of the financial. Oops. There we go. Okay, so along the lines of educating the community and creating a better presentation visually, we included some analytics, and one of those kind of pie charts was to show the expense by category for the association. And kind of the key takeaway here is that 64% of our total operating budget when it comes to expense is associated to associated with salaries, wages, and benefits. So again, I think you heard Bill say it many times, we are in the people business, right? We provide a service, and it takes people to do that. So just wanted to, include in that presentation the makeup of our expense by category and show that employees are a huge expense for us, a huge investment. Also, wanted to include a slide that showed a pie chart of our expenses. If you take out the salaries and wages and benefits, what percentage of our overall expense make up the other expenses? And also call out the expense categories that are being impacted as well in the presentation. So that's what this chart does here. And then we go on to speak about, if you remember from the presentation, we go on to speak about utilities, landscape maintenance, repairs and maintenance, interest, and financial expenses. This slide here was just to show expense by division for the association and where our total expense, which divisions make up those total expenses and the percentage of that. So that's what this slide does here. And then inversely, which divisions make up our revenue. So this slide shows that. And then one of the great pieces of feedback we received from the committee was from John, and he wanted to see the amenities that we have, what portion of those amenities is subsidized by the community. So this chart here shows basically for our members how much of their dues go towards those amenities. Another piece of feedback we received from this committee was that and we also received it from the golf committee, was the rate increase for our members versus the rate increase in golf for our non-members. So we went back, sharpened the pencil a little bit, took these increases, allocated them, took the time period, so the busiest time periods, allocated those increases, and overall it was about a 7% increase. Kathy, I know you wanted to see what the total increase was. And then also the average rate increase for members is $2. The average rate increase for non-members is $4. And then we locked in that rounds play at 320,000 rounds. We actually have two slides, two visuals regarding rate comparisons. I included one on here, but you'll see on the full presentation there's two. This one is the rate comparison of our guests or public play versus our competitors or our peers. And you can see we lie right in the middle, kind of upper middle for outside play. In our resident play rates, we're a little lower, but again, the value that you get for that rate here is unmatched. This slide was referenced earlier. Put this together. This kind of shows the trend of from 2013-14 fiscal year through the proposed fiscal year 22-23 budget, and it displays what our FTEs have done for each of those years. You can see that there's a sharp decline from 1920 to 2021, and we're still, battling to find the sweet spot, let's call it. I don't know that it's 313, but 287's pushing it for being able to provide those services that you all need or this community needs. So this chart kind of reflects that and shows where we've been and where we are and where we hope to be. This slide just reflects the APF change that was we brought from the committee, brought forward, and that's the impact, the financial impact of that would pull us almost in line if we budgeted 1,200 annual sales or title changes, would pull us almost in line with projected 21, 22. Capital budget changes. Currently, there are no changes, or at least no changes ready to present. I know that you may have heard in some of the other committee meetings that there's a huge Grandview irrigation project that's gone out to bid, and we are sitting on some proposals, and so there will be a change. This is just a heads up that there will be one. We just aren't ready to present it yet, and that'll be presented at the April 8th Governing Board workshop in detail. Okay, next step. So, as we said, the next step is the Governing Board workshop on April 8th. Obviously, we'll continue to refine the budget as certain things come up and certain changes come up either with the market or specific operations that we need to incorporate into that. And then we'll track those changes specifically and present those at the B&F committee review on April 19th. Along the lines of educating the community, we have community forums that are set for April 27th and April 28th, and then capital budget items over $100,000 approved by the Governing Board on April 28th, and then the final budget Governing Board approval will be on May 26th. Any questions?
Cliff, that's a great presentation, and I want to thank you for listening and responding to our committee from last month. Anybody have any further comments they want to make, suggestions, what have you? This is a very fluid document, by the way.
I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
We will see revisions continuing into the spring. Those of you who've been on this committee in the past, you know that March is a little early to have anything in finality.
Yeah.
John, did you?
Yes, I have a couple comments, questions. First of all, thank you very much for listening and putting together a very, very good presentation. I'm very impressed with it, and I think the visuals really help me understand this, and I'd like to just make a couple very quick comments about them because I see a very nice alignment with the subsidies and our community. First of all, the golf. I read quite a bit in the letters to the editors and so forth about the golf subsidies. And roughly, I believe about 25% of the community are really avid golfers. The subsidy in there is very much in line with that kind of a percentage that we are subsidizing very appropriately of money to that segment, 25% of the people, and I can't tell you what the percentage on the golf is, but it's right in that range very nicely. The rec centers, which I assume includes the swimming pool facilities, I kind of think of the swimming pool, the fitness centers, and then the club rooms as general support to the vast majority of the community. And I think that's where we're spending our rec fees. To me, it's a very nice alignment between the common good and the specific goods. And my hat goes off to everybody involved in the administration of our community. This is really, really appropriate work. And you've been very, very good stewards of our money. And I think these visuals reflect that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Cliff. I do want to remind everyone that we will have community budget forums. They will be held here in the lecture hall on April 27th at 9 a.m. and on April 28th at 5:30 p.m. Also, want all the committee members to remember that there is a committee appreciation event next Wednesday on the 30th from 3 to 5. Those of you who've been on the committee in the past, long ago, we used to hold these, and then we had a pandemic. So you may not have been to one of these in the past. Do we have any further comments from our committee?
And I just want to just say, Brown & Brown, I know they left. That had to be one of the most informative insurance presentations that I've seen. And what's great for the community, we always sit here and talk about transparency of what goes on. There it is, right there, exactly what it is. And the same thing for Cliff and this presentation. The transparency you're giving the owner members of this community is second to none. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, Yuri?
I just wanted to acknowledge the staff. My wife and I had the chance to stop over at the Pora building last Tuesday and look at the new Village store. It is phenomenal. There were 14 people in there, and every single person in there raved about the improvement over what we had before. So all the agony and the aggravation created by a small faction of people in the community should finally be put to bed, because what's in there now is fantastic.
It really is. I would echo those comments. Any other committee comments? Do we have any comments from our live guests?